Where do you start? Where do you start on an episode such as the one that we are providing right now? Good morning. This is a little bit of a bonus episode for Hometown Huddle. It is the morning of, by the time you're watching this, it is daylight in the morning of February 21st, 2026. The time that listen, this show is going to be this little bonus episode all about being open, honest, and transparent, as Dirk Harkins wisely says. So for full transparency, it is the evening prior, technically, for myself, and you're watching this the morning of the 21st. Now, I'll tell you, it's not too far from the morning of the 21st for myself, but I digress. We figured it would be wise to call a little bit of a bonus episode, given some of the things that have been circulating throughout the past couple of days. You see the headline, you see the title of the episode, you see what we're going to be talking about this morning. I have to say, for full disclosure, again, honest, open, transparent, whatever the saying is, I don't dismiss it because I don't agree with it. I dismiss it because Dirk says it much better than I do, and he embodies it much better than I do for a fact. But we got to be honest, right? So let me tell you a brief story, a brief little anecdote. When we were doing the on-site interview with the directors of the OHSAA wrestling tournament down at West Banco Arena back in, I don't even remember when that was, sometime in January, we took care of the interview. We lingered around a little bit, and on our way out, several hours after recording the interview, as the wrestling's going on our way out, we myself and the rest of Harco Media Network, we see a guy who is maybe looking at us, maybe not looking at us. I'll tell you, somebody looked at me and asked, "Is that who I think it is?" And every time I would look up at the guy, he would look at me. And so I had to look away so as to not be awkward, right? So we were kind of playing eye tag a little bit. So we figured, heck with it. We don't know. It doesn't matter. We walk by. This guy, who is wearing a black Weir Red Riders sweatshirt, ends up walking down from the bleachers, comes up, and shakes my hand and says, "Love the show. I listen to the show. I like the show." And turns out that gentleman was Quincy Wilson. Quincy Wilson, very personable, very nice guy, was very nice with us that day in the brief 30-second, if that, conversation that we had. And I'm not the only one who has had a positive encounter with Mr. Wilson. You hear people talk all the time about how personable he is and how nice he is. And if he was being honest with us, and he actually watches the show and continues to watch the show up until the morning of February 21st, 2026, if he's watching right now, we got to let him know. Coach Wilson, anytime you'd like. You know the email is in the description of the show. It's all over the place. It's not hard to find. Get a hold of us. We'll get a hold of you. We'll be in touch, and we'll gladly have you on the show because we're interested in talking ball. We want to know what you have to say about football because we love football, even in the dark months of February. I'm the biggest football guy there is, even in lieu of the OHSAA basketball tournament, which we might talk about here in a little bit as well. But I say all that to say there have been some things circulating around Coach Wilson that are not all entirely positive. But again, I must preface, those are rumors. Those are things that are alleged. Nothing that has been said has been proven to be fact, yet none of it has been proven to be fiction. We won't take any of it as fact. We won't take any of it as fiction. It is purely rumors. And again, we are kindly, gladly offering a spot for Coach Wilson to come on and not only talk ball, because he's got a lot of ball to talk, I'd imagine, given his time with WVU, first of all with Weir, then WVU, then the NFL. But we also would like to give him a platform to maybe combat some of these things. I can't imagine he believes all of these things are true. So we would like to give him a platform to, if there is any kind of story with any legs, we want to make sure that he can tell his side of the story as well. What do we talk about when we talk about rumors and we talk about these stories and we talk about things swirling around different programs? Well, there are, and again, I must preface that none of this is fact. We don't know if any of this is fact. We don't know if any of this is fiction. It is pure rumors. So there is a there's a rumor about his time at Rio Grande and the ending there, and there have been subsequent more rumors about his time at Weir. Again, he was the football coach at Weir this past season, returning back to his alma mater, and they had a really rough season. I'll tell you, Frank Sassini's a good head coach. He had that program just a couple of years ago with a lot more wins than they did losses, and then you look at Sassini's final year, not very many wins, a lot of losses. What that tells me is maybe the 0-10 record is not purely indicative or an indictment on whoever is the head ball coach at Weir, right? Sometimes athletic programs, you see it all over the place. You see it down the road. Hayes isn't any different of a guy he was 2 years ago or 3 years ago when he led him to a 9-win season compared to who he is when he led him to a 4-win season, right? Like, I don't think that your wins and losses are purely indicative of who you are as a coach, the job that you've done as a coach. I think a lot of things, now it is your job as a coach to get the best out of your guys, but sometimes you can only squeeze 12 ounces out of a can because that's all you've got. And in other years, you can squeeze maybe 24 or 36 ounces out. That's the way it works. And so sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes you're not dealt the best cards, right? So there are negative rumors about his time at Weir in regard to Coach Quincy Wilson. And that is amidst an 0-10 season. But let's not forget that there was not far from an 0-10 season the year before he got there as well, is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of people will chalk that record up to the negative things that are alleged about Coach Wilson. And I don't know that there's a ton of validity to that. But if these things are true, very bad. What are these things? So you're talking about fights with players, fights between players, breaking out at practice, and nothing entirely being done to stop those things. You're talking about not really a well-constructed practice plan, not a very well-constructed game plan, not a great plan walking into game day, not walking in at all to practices on Saturday, especially when WVU is playing at home. You're talking about a situation where, again, potentially, allegedly, a situation where he may not have had certain qualifications that you would need to coach football at Weir, at a public high school in West Virginia, yet the board granted him the ability. They kind of dismissed those things and granted him the ability to coach. And if he didn't misrepresent himself, again, that's on the board, not him. Again, all these things are allegedly. So then you dig through, and again, this is coming from, I'll grant you one more piece of the other side of the story. This is kind of coming from this player's letter that has been circulating. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but there's, and I'll be honest about this as well, I haven't seen this letter anywhere other than a particular Twitter account. I don't know if this account has connections. I don't know if anything that is put on this account is true. I don't know anything. It could all be false. It could all be made up. And I haven't seen this player's letter anywhere other than the Twitter account that it came out of. So I refuse to call it X. So all of those things come from that letter. And we don't know if that's true or false. Again, if it's true, it's a bad look. It's a bad look when your football team goes 0-10 and you're missing Saturday practices. You're missing. You don't have all the qualifications you need to actually be a coach. Very bad. If all of that is true, very bad. If you got players fighting each other and nothing's being done to stop it, very bad. But if none of that is true, which is possible, if none of that is true, then that is it's like a witch hunt. It's I don't know how much of it is true. I will say, in regard to the other rumors that have been circulating, that particular Twitter account is not the only place we're hearing those from. Maybe some folks from Charleston have some idea about what's been going on, maybe at his prior stop before Weir. But again, we are gladly offering the space right over there. I sit over there, he sits there, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. And we talk about these kinds of things because, again, when people are saying things about you that aren't true, there's nothing that you want more than the ability to tell your side of the story. And so, again, we want to fully acknowledge that these things may not be true. But we also can't deny them 100% either. This is all up in the air. You look at the ending of his time at the place he was at before Weir, and none of it is good. Now, let's look at the timeline on some of these things. After we look at the timeline and we look at maybe another element of this whole thing, we're gonna really put on the tinfoil hat at some point later on in this episode. But first of all, on January 30th, it broke that Coach Wilson was filing to run for District 1 in the West Virginia House of Delegates. He's running against, if he gets the Democratic nomination, he'll be running against a longtime incumbent out there. And how unprofessional. We got to have the cell phone on silent. It's 5:30 in the morning. Who's up at this time, right? What a way to break up the show. Let's crack the Mountain Dew. We we don't care anymore, right? We'll tell you what it is because it's too good for us not to share with you what it is. It's also, if I have a heart attack on air, I guess you'll know why, because this is not the first serving of caffeine I've had since waking up a long time ago. But anyway, so he's running for the West Virginia House of Delegates. That happened on January 30th. It wasn't until a couple of days ago, I don't know, what was it, February 19th, 18th, something along those lines. It wasn't until then that it broke that he was resigning from his position at Weir. So you would think if you're going to file to run for office, you would think that, again, I could be wrong, very ignorant about many things, but you would think that there wouldn't be so much time in between there, right? Now, I don't know. I know in West Virginia there's a way to potentially pull this off, a way that is not available in Ohio, but, this may be a very ignorant hypothesis that I have. Maybe there was a world in which he coached and served at the same time. I find that to be highly unlikely. I know in a place like Ohio, you can't do that unless it's a private school. We'll talk about a particular private school here in a moment. But it just struck me as odd how he filed on January 30th, at least that's when the news broke, and then it wasn't until the third week of February that he resigned from Weir. Now, he gave a couple of seconds maybe to News 9 and actually spoke about this. And I always analyze. I get accused of overanalyzing everything all the time, which can be very good, can be very bad at times. But I'm looking into this, and before I even watch the clip, I'm like, okay, I really want to analyze his choice of language, because what can we learn from somebody's choice of language? Somebody like myself, I try to be very particular with the language that I use at times. We've had to do so on this show a lot. And so a couple of the things that I took away were, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he and Weir both decided it was time, both parties decided it was time to part ways. That could mean something, that could mean nothing. We could be dealing with somebody who doesn't speak in a way that reveals other things if you read between the lines. Some people just tell it like it is, and I admire those folks in certain moments. There are other folks, I don't know which kind of person Wilson is, but there are other folks who speak in a particular way, like I just said. So it was a mutual parting of ways. Both parties decided it was time for both sides to go their own way. But at the very end of that clip, he said he's still going to coach at a high school in the Valley. It just won't be at Weir. He didn't say it wouldn't be in Weirton. He said it won't be at Weir, meaning Weir High School. So what does this mean? Does this really mean that he was trying to maybe serve and coach at the same time? Does this mean that those rumors that we talked about a few moments ago are true, and Weir said, hey man, we're going to throw you a bone. Just go ahead and step down. That way we don't have to make this ugly. We don't have to fire you. It doesn't have to be an ugly ending, which happens probably more often than folks realize. Again, these are all kind of conspiracy theories. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? Maybe not. But it's something to think about. Something to chew on, as Dirk would say. So it is my understanding, obviously in Ohio, you can't hold elected office and also have another occupation that is public, like a public school, right? You can't do both things at the same time. In West Virginia, you can, but your employer at, for instance, Weir, has to give you those 60 days that you would be in session. They have to give you that off, is my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. And it's also my understanding that time is typically like January, February. It's a pretty dead period as far as football. So maybe it is plausible that he was trying to do both at the same time, realized he wouldn't be able to do it for whatever reason, and he and Weir decided to part ways. Or the rumors that we talked about his time in the past or his time in one season at Weir, or those are true, and that's why that was the reason for the resignation. Again, we don't know. But then you look at another interesting element to all of this, and this is where I really wish I had a tinfoil hat, because I'm going to admittedly turn into an insane person and talk crazy for a second. Weir and Madonna did not have a football team. I can't believe this is so crazy. But I figured we'd get it out there because it makes sense. It's just really out there. Madonna's football program was non-existent in 2025. They didn't have a football team that season because numbers were an issue. It was my understanding that the 8th grade numbers weren't high either, and so who were they going to get? I didn't think they would start back up in the foreseeable future at all, and I wasn't the only one. I can guarantee you I wasn't the only one that thought that. But they announced recently, maybe, I don't know, a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago, that football was going to return to Madonna in 2026. And at that point, they had a couple games scheduled. Now they're up to a point where they've got 9 games scheduled. They've got a couple scrimmages scheduled. And so they're serious about this thing. And when the announcement was first made, they had a football coach. And it was Quentin Smith, I believe was his name. And he was going to be the coach. And then just recently, he steps down from that position after, a month or 2 on the job? That's probably a bonus episode in itself, just thinking about that concept. Like, why? It could be something with nothing at all. Maybe he wanted to spend more time with his family. You don't know those things. It could be something as small as that. It could be something as big as maybe Quincy Wilson has lined up something where he takes the Madonna job. This is why we wanted to do this bonus episode and get this out soon, because there are too many things here that you never know when news like this is going to break. Maybe Madonna has somebody else lined up already that we don't know about. Maybe they have a dark horse candidate that's just sitting in the weeds, lurking and waiting to take that job. We don't know. We don't know why their coach of a couple months stepped down. We don't know anything. I just figured it's odd that Coach Wilson said he wasn't going to be coaching at Weir, but he would be coaching in the Valley. But again, so I don't think I'm crazy for thinking this way. He said publicly that he was going to coach at a high school in the Valley. Yet I would imagine he's running to win the election. So in my mind, that tells me there is a world in which he believes he can do both. And maybe he can do both. I don't know. Maybe it's better for him to do both at Madonna as opposed to Weir. And maybe there were certain other things that forced him out of Weir as well, because there were really, again, there were pretty bad rumors swirling around his time at Weir. And you look at that district that he's running for. I mean, I think he's going to have an opportunity after November to do whatever he wants, because I don't think that's going to be a hang-up for him. Let's just be realistic about this thing. The Democrat hasn't gotten anywhere close to a majority or a plurality of that vote in a very long time. And I think the incumbent's pretty confident that he'll win. I share that sentiment. But I don't think Coach Wilson is running because he doesn't think he's going to win. You see this all the time. Folks, when the odds are stacked against them and the polls may be showing that, 80% of folks favor the other guy, if you're really determined to make changes that you believe in, you don't care what the polls say. You think you're going to run and you're going to win. I'm just saying, if I was a betting man, which I may or may not be, I don't think this dual job aspect of serving in Charleston while also trying to coach a football team, I think he could just coach a football team after November when it's all said and done. And again, there's still time for him to come out and say, you know what, I think football is not my focus right now. I really think I want to make a run at this thing. There's also time for him to pull out of the race. We don't know. I just thought it was interesting that the way all this kind of came together. And again, the reason I say these things, the reason we talk about these things is, one, because we've never really had a situation like this since we've been doing Hometown Huddle since July. We haven't had a situation like this to really talk about We haven't had a situation like this that has made me put on such a tinfoil hat and get so lost in the weeds of a conspiracy theory that I've maybe come up with. And I think a lot of what I said is more in line with a conspiracy theory. It would be crazy if we somehow got something right, but I don't know how realistic a lot of it is. But I do know that, like, I'm not the only one that thinks there may be some things that were not good about his time at Weir. There are certain things that are only found in that fake or real, we don't know, in that player's letter that has started to circulate. Some things are only found in there, but other things are talked about throughout the valley. They're talked about in Charleston, and they're widely known, whether the majority of the public knows it or wants to accept it or not. But again, that's why I led the show with, if Coach Wilson is watching, he can come on and talk about whatever he wants. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. I think I'll be able to just be quiet and let him speak. So we'll see. We'll see where things go on that end. But we've got to take another sip of the just glorious Mountain Dew. I wish we had Diet Mountain Dew, but this'll be fine. This'll be fine for us. What an evening, by the way. What an evening. There's probably something I missed about that Coach Wilson situation, but because there's just so many thoughts. But it could be as crazy as he ends up coaching at Madonna because those things lined up kind of in a weird way. And also he ends up serving in Charleston come January. It could be as crazy as that. It could be as not crazy as he's going to coach somewhere else. A majority of the rumors were not true. And we look back on this in November, and I just laugh at myself because I was a fool. We'll see who's the fool. But with that being said, one other thing that we've got to talk about while we have you here, I hope I haven't wasted a solid 20 minutes of your time. On the last show, just the other night, we talked about the OHSAA bracket, and we kind of got into just a little bit. We just barely scratched the surface of the specifics of it on the boys' side, the teams that were in it and everything else. And I even said, this is a great segue, I even said, newsflash, every team makes it in. This is a good time to kind of break down my thoughts on that. So the title probably says, full OHSAA bracket thoughts. Not on the teams, but on the format. I led the show tonight with it. I've said it a million times. I'm a football guy. And so I guess that is my reason for my worldview on how certain things should work when it comes to high school athletics. It bothers me. This is a complete subjective opinion. This is just a me thing. And I get that I'm in the minority. I understand that I'm wrong. But here are my thoughts. It bothers me that every team makes it in on a matter of principle. The regular season in any sport should have more urgency. I can't stand, I know no team is going to go out there and purposely throw all 22 of their games because they want to save bodies, they want to do whatever just so they can make a run in the tournament. No team is going to do that. That's not realistic. That's not what's happening. And I know that's the case. But the idea that you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. Your regular season games, no matter how much, no matter how good of a battle it might be between two good old-fashioned rivals on the court, they've been playing that thing since 1927. If you're going to make it in the tournament, and maybe I have the wrong view on this. Maybe I'm too focused on the tournament. I don't know. But I like a little sense of regular season urgency. And I don't like that you have the security of everybody making it in the tournament. I don't know what I could compare it to. It's almost as though whether this show does well or does poor, something good for me is going to happen. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. It's not merit-based. We talked a little while ago. I may have talked about it. I may not have, but I certainly have the idea. We all recognize that the football bracket used to have 8 teams per region. Then they went to 16 after the COVID year when they realized we could let everybody in this thing. And then they settled on 16. I think the OHSAA kind of liked the weight that added to some wallets in Columbus. And they really liked that for a while. And then it got to a point where teams were opting out of playoff games where you should have maximum urgency. Everybody should just be over the moon to play in a playoff game. Twice, Marion Local, folks were ducking Marion Local because they were so good, they were so overpowered. Now, we can have a conversation about that in itself, but you got the sense that, and I was traversing the hallways of a high school on my way from one class to another when they made the move to 16 teams per region. And I remember the sentiment in the high school. Not many folks liked it, especially when you're a team that's only won 4 games out of your 10. You had a 16 seed, and you had to go play the number 1 team in the state. Like, folks, like, that's not, from a health standpoint, that's not entirely something that you'd be looking forward to. And I was never going to be the one that said, man, the OHSAA is just doing this for more money. They're doing this because it benefits their pockets. They're not doing it for the benefit of the student athlete. I've never been that bold as to say those things. But I'm bold enough to say you can put the pieces together. So the OHSAA said, okay, we're going to reduce this thing to 12 because 16, we all see now that 16 is, we'd be crazy to see that 16, we'd be crazy to not see that 16 is not good. So they brought it back down to 12. It's been told to me by athletic directors, I think they kind of like the fact that every team makes it in the bracket in basketball and actually in all other sports. Those sports aren't as physically taxing from a contact standpoint as football is, and so you don't have the same kind of safety concerns. And so that with that element being taken out of it, because I don't know how soon you would have gone back to 12 in football if it weren't for a couple of teams being concerned about safety and avoiding a team like Marion Local. So you don't have that element in basketball or any other sport. And so what reason does the OHSAA have to, other than common sense, to not let everybody in? So everybody gets in. I don't like that. That's issue number 1 that I have. Again, these are not issues. These are not objective issues. These are personal, subjective issues. Again, I'm the crazy one. That's fine. That's fine with me. And then you look at the kind of the geography, the organization of it all. Why do we have a district with just 5 teams? First of all, that's an odd number. Something about my brain, like, how are you going to have a bracket with 5 teams? Come on now. I understand that they do it because, again, everybody makes it in, and then you have regions and you have districts with all of them have an unequal amount of teams. And so my proposal, and a lot of that bothers me. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but a lot of it bothers me. So my proposal was to, as best you can, you have 7 divisions in boys basketball. As best you can, in all of those divisions, I know you're going to have disparities along the way. Divide those divisions up into regions as closely as you can to equal in terms of number of teams per region. So I think the way that would look is you would have a Division 1 with maybe, I don't know, 20-some schools per region. And again, try to get that thing as close to equal as possible by using geography. You got to gerrymander a little bit here and there. Everybody does it. And then I think in your bigger divisions, like bigger as far as there's more schools in Division 7 than 1, I think you're looking at maybe 30, 35 teams per region. But again, as long as you have it within, like each region is within 2 teams of each other, if that makes sense, right? Like if a region has, if a division has a region with 33 teams and 34 teams, 35 teams, and then 34 teams, like that's okay. That kind of disparity is okay in my mind. And again, I will fully explain why this isn't doable entirely, why this isn't plausible, why this isn't done, why I'm the crazy one. But again, this helps my mind look at these things in a better way. So that's the first step, right? Then, and again, I said your divisions with less teams would have roughly 20-some teams per region. Then you divide that region geographically into 2 equal districts. I don't think you'd ever have a district with less than like 14 or 15 teams across the board. You'd have some with maybe up to 17 teams. And again, you do this geographically and you draw a line so that the same amount of schools are on either side of that line. You do that in the regions as well as the districts. Then, crazy idea, You have districts with either 14, 15, 16, 17. With any number of teams, you take the top 12 at the end of the basketball season, or any season for that matter, and you play it out from there. So then what would it be? Your district, and we got to get better about the naming system of all these too. Like, I don't know how you want to do it. I don't have the solution on it. I hate calling out problems without providing solutions, but because you got to be pragmatic about things. But, and again, I'm the crazy one because I'm the one that gets confused by the numbering system of like East District 3 or Northeast West, or I'm sorry, Northwest, North. I'm clearly confused. You get the point. I think you get the point. Like Northeast 2 or 3, whatever. So if we have Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, Region 4, what if 1 was divided into 1A and 1B? Not because B is less than A, but because it's the South, it's whatever, right? It's just the second one. So you would then take your top 12 in every district, and your top 4 get a bye. 12 plays at 5. You play that out on the campus of the higher seeded team. You get away with the, I don't have much of an issue with the drawing of, you get seeded, and then from there, that's the order in which you draw your place on the bracket. I don't have much of an issue with that, but for this case, let's just do away with it. And you're quickly seeing how this resembles not only the OHSAA football playoffs, but also the college football playoffs. But that's just because of the number 12. It would be the same if you ended up with 10, 11, or 12 teams per district, and I would say take the top 8 because you need that urgency. I don't want to yell at you, but you need the urgency of, listen, we're 19 games into a 22-game schedule. We have to win out. We've got two teams we think we can beat and one team that's going to be a tough challenge, but we have to win out to get into the top whatever to make the bracket. I like that urgency. I like the scarcity when it comes to playoff spots. Anything worth valuable or anything that is valuable, anything that has value, you like a little bit of scarcity associated with that. That's not a new concept. So you take your top 12, 12 plays at 5, then you get the 4 winners, they join the top 4, you play it out from there, and then every district has a winner. You play the winner of the other district in your region. Now every region has a winner, and then you play it out from there. Also, I forgot probably the most important things. Ditch max preps once and for all. What bone do I have to pick with max preps? Not much. I will say it is kind of striking. I mean, I've really had the tinfoil hat on for a long time. You're probably witnessing a guy go insane on air, but it's okay because I think these are interesting topics. And I get a little fired up, not only because I've had 1,000 milligrams of caffeine since I woke up, but because I care about these things. It's just passion. As I told Ryan Clifford, like, you might get fired up, might get a little animated, but that just means you care about something. And there's nothing wrong with caring about things because the last thing you want is a society that's apathetic. I digress. So where was I before I went off on that tangent? Yeah, get rid of Max Preps. It strikes me in a weird way that Max Preps is owned by a company whose CEO, to my knowledge, doesn't have a sports background, doesn't have an Ohio background. I'm very I want the states to be their own thing on this, which is a little bit of a contradictive statement or contradictory, whatever the case is. I've also been up for a long time, so no matter how much of this stuff I have, it can't fully lock you in. But I want the states to be their own. So I hate how Max Preps is this national thing, and we don't know necessarily who's behind it, like, and what their motivations would be. You could say I won't be the one, but you could say the same thing about the OHSAA. But I want this thing to be more state-oriented. And I can't think of a better system to use for the OHSAA basketball tournament than Martin RPI. Braylon Martin, I think, is the guy's name. I think he's from Athens. I could be wrong. Athens, Ohio. And not a company somewhere in Georgia, which I believe is where somebody with some affiliation of Max Preps is. Right? We want Ohio people running the Ohio tournament, and we want it done we want it to have a sense of common sense to it. And I think Martin RPI does the best job of that. I also think you could use a system like his. I think you could use a system like Fantastic 50 in the football playoffs. I don't have a problem with the way the football playoffs are ran, but again, I think the way that they talk about strength of schedule and you use the winning percentage of your team, but also your opponents, but also their opponents. Like Martin RPI has a very clear system that is very clearly laid out because many folks have had issues with max preps. And again, I don't even say that that's a max preps issue. That's just bound to happen when you have a company that's dealing with all 50, well, I think it's 48 states. Get it back in Ohio. Put this thing in Ohio where it belongs. Get it out of the hands of a company. Again, I really don't have this big of an issue with max preps. I just get a little irritated. And also, I think it is on the coaches maybe to accurately submit scores. But I know for a fact that one, I've got 2 points here. You can tell they're coming to me as we speak. One, it covers such a large area. Again, the lower 48, you're bound to have issues when there is just so much information. There's bound to be error, sampling error, I think they call that. And then two, I have noticed in my own experience with max preps, dating back to like 10 years ago, even I can notice that the information on there is not always accurate because I can look at a score of a football game that I played in and it'll be off by a point or the stats will be a little bit wrong somewhere on that site. I think somebody gave me 8 yards rushing. I only got 6, maybe 5. I didn't have no 8 yards rushing. And again, that's a very we're nitpicking here, but use Martin RPI. And now we'll talk about the points that I made prior to that, which was this geographic orientation of things, of your regions, of your districts, and things like that. The reason it can't happen is very simple. Anytime, what's crazy is I think the geographic center of the United States, if you look at just the lower 48, just the continental 48, I think the geographic center of the United States is in like Kansas. In fact, I'm pretty certain it's in Kansas. I just don't know where. But when you add Alaska and Hawaii, it's South Dakota. Or maybe if it's just, I don't know if it's the entire United States or if it's just the North American continent. I'm not sure. But when you add all that area, your geographic center shifts all the way up to South Dakota. I think I've been there, or somewhere near there. And so this concept, when you have, if you think about the high schools on a map in a division, in a region, whatever, the cities are the ones that throw this off because that is a cluster of points on this scatter plot. And what that does is pulls the average that way. Because you could have, let's say there are 30 schools in or around Franklin County. Where are your other 30 schools? In the surrounding 8 counties? If that, if not more, if not much more, now that I actually think about it. So what that does is screws up my entire proposal because of reasons like travel, right? You don't really give those smaller schools, or at least those more rural schools, you don't give them the same benefit of the doubt that you naturally would give to the city schools because there's a very short distance between 2 schools in the city and a much larger distance between schools in rural areas. So because of those reasons, because of travel, that's why I'm aware that this is not something that is possible. It's not something that will happen. But in an alternate universe and in an alternate universe and in a unicorn fairy tale land, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing this be tried out just for a time or two, just a season or two, just to see how it would work. You have things like, one of my first pushbacks was, well, you travel for football. Everything can't work like football. And I know that better than anybody, and I had to be reminded of that because you're working with first of all, many more teams. You're working with different nights of the week and all of those things. So those are my thoughts on the OHSAA bracket. Also, real quick before we get out of here, I know this has been a bit of a longer episode, but the IVC, The IVC, we're looking to see if they will survive what they've gone through. Again, with the exit of Sandy Valley, Tusky Valley, and Claymont, it was not surprising to me that those teams, not just this past season, but for the majority of recent history, have been at least in football, which again we addressed, probably drives a lot of these decisions. Those three schools have had the worst records out of the 6 teams in that division. They've had the worst records over the last number of years, and you're left over with an Indian Valley, a Garaway, and a Ridgewood, who all kind of compete at the top. There's a very clear 1, 2, 3. Of course, with Indian Valley being at the top of that. So the question becomes, can those 3 schools find more schools to try to join the IVC? I've heard opinions that are not confident in that, and it may look like the IVC might survive with what they have in that North Division, and Indian Valley, Garaway, and Ridgewood may end up going elsewhere, but that's really what it comes down to. I wanted to make sure I got that across and articulated it in a very clear way. It all comes down to, does Indian Valley, Garaway, and Ridgewood, or the entire IVC, can the IVC bring in schools to fill in the rest of that division, or do those 3 schools leave? Do any other schools leave? And try to find new conference. I think we may be on the cusp of major high school athletic conference realignment in that part of the state. You look at that area, kind of that northeastern quadrant of the state, we're probably on the cusp of major realignment, is my opinion on that. But who knows? That's why what a hypothetical show we have tonight. Who knows? Are the rumors about Coach Wilson true? Is it actually possible to pull off the OHSAA bracket idea that I had? Probably not. And which way does the IVC go? Those are some of our thoughts on this bonus episode of Hometown Huddle. Clearly had a lot on the mind. It's getting a little cold, so we're going to have to wrap up a little bit soon. But those were our thoughts. We may do this a little more often anytime something that comes. And the reason we really thought we should do this is, one, I was displeased with the performance that we gave the other night on Hometown Huddle. Didn't believe it was up to the standard that we set here for ourselves. Dirk and I talk all the time about competing with nothing other than the standard that you've set for yourself. And I don't know how well we did that the other night. Maybe we did a good job. I don't know. But I didn't feel as though we articulated things in a great way. I probably didn't do that tonight either. But you also had situations with breaking news and things like that. And so wanted to make sure we got our thoughts out about those things just in case something comes out over the next couple of days, particularly with the Coach Quincy Wilson situation. We also, for a final time, I will reiterate, none of the rumors that we talked about and none of the rumors that are circulating are fact, and they're not fiction. They are rumors. Nothing more, nothing less. And if Coach Wilson wants to A, talk ball, B, defend himself from these things that are being said about him, he will always have a platform here because, again, I'm not the only one who's had a good interaction with him. He's a nice guy. He's been nice to us. We want to give him the platform to speak his mind and give his side of whatever story needs to be told. But again, some of those things, if true, not a good look. And that may be the reason. Look, I mean, that you don't need those things to throw into the fire of an election, but some of those things give the incumbent confidence. Not my words. I can't say whose words those are. But that's all we've got for this bonus episode of Hometown Huddle. What a crazy sequence. I mean, I can't believe I was a part of the conversations that we were having in this very studio just a matter of hours ago before we turned the cameras on and got the lights set up. Got to go both ways sometimes. Got to make some concessions and got to compromise on a lot of things. It really reiterates the fact that nothing worth getting done can be accomplished without compromise. Also, made a trip down from. What an eventful night! Again, went and saw a musical. Republicans can see musicals, right? They can also drink iced coffee and Mountain Dew. And we will gladly do so. And we will gladly let you go. I know you're probably sick of hearing me at this point. I am too. But with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to this bonus episode. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. And with that being said, for everybody at Harco Media Network, I'm Drake Watson saying so long, and we'll see you next time.